Hey friends, in the previous video, we shared how smoking is a negative consumption externality in that it results in harmful health effects on non-smokers who are not involved in the decision to smoke. In this video, we cover ways to address or reduce negative consumption externalities. So let's continue to use the example of smoking in Singapore and learn what Singapore is doing about smoking. So as you see in this mind map over here, there are four key policies to correct or reduce negative consumption externalities. The first one will be market-based policies or indirect taxes. The second will be government regulation or legislation. The third will be education. And the last would be nudges. So let me explain each policy and then reflect these in diagrams. So firstly, in terms of indirect taxes, which is point number one, in Singapore, the current cigarette tax is 49 cents per stick. So this increases the cost of smoking and is reflected in the graph as an upward shift of the supply curve to produce at social optimum. So as we see in this particular graph, the tax would increase the cost of production, and this is reflected in the diagram as the upward shift of the supply curve. Now moving on to the other three policies such as education, legislation, and nudges. In Singapore, we have progressively raised the minimum legal age for the sale and use of tobacco products from 18 years old to 21 years old in 2021. Smoking is also banned at all public parks and gardens, which then reduces the number of people who are smoking and reduces the private benefits that they enjoy. So reflecting this theory in this particular diagram, we see how the overall marginal private benefit falls to overlap with the marginal social benefit. In terms of education, there are smoking prevention talks in primary and secondary schools, basically elementary and high schools for our friends in the West. So youth smokers can sign up for what we call an I Quit program, which empowers youth smokers with the knowledge and support to quit smoking and remain smoke-free. So this reduces people smoking, which once again reduces the overall marginal private benefit to overlap with the marginal social benefit. Lastly, in terms of nudges, Singapore also has yellow smoking boxes, where smokers must stand inside in order to smoke. But finding these boxes are often very challenging, and the boxes are not exactly very big in size. So these are small design features that hopefully nudge smokers to smoke less. The key point for all of these four policies is that increasing your marginal private costs or reducing the marginal private benefit will lead to the market producing at social optimal levels. So in this case, if the marginal private benefit falls to overlap with the marginal social benefit, in theory, the free market will also produce less quantity of cigarettes, which then overlaps with the socially optimum quantity, QOPT. And as a result, this could reduce market failure. But naturally, implementing these policies have their own set of advantages and disadvantages. As we have mentioned in the previous videos, taxes internalize the externality. Only those smokers pay for the tax on cigarettes, for example. But once again, it is very difficult to measure the exact value of external costs. Also, as we recall from the previous chapter on elasticities, goods such as cigarettes also have relatively inelastic demand. So while this could increase tax revenues for the government, it may not be as effective to reduce smoking and by extension, reduce the size of negative externality. Regulations can be effective at reducing externalities, but if and only if these legislation or regulation are enforced, and if smokers even adhere to the legislation. Lastly, education creates awareness among society as a whole, but it may not be as effective as other methods, such as legislation or taxes, and it could be very costly to implement educational programs in schools.